I'm Carl Ceder, and I'm the youngest son of Dennis Ceder. About 8 months ago, I spoke at my grandfather's funeral, and I spoke at my dad's adoption. I never thought that I'd be speaking at my father's funeral less than a year later. But today, what I would like to tell you about is that little boy that was adopted. I'm going to tell you about that man that meant so much to me. In the last week or two, when I was thinking about what I was going to say, I had a very difficult time. And it was because I thought to myself, how can I sum up 36 years of being with my father, who was my best friend, my mentor, my protector, and my closest friend and confidant. So bear with me, because I'm going to try. My father gave a speech to one of my brother's congregations, and I was watching it on the internet recently. And in it, he talks about his adoption and how and when he was told. He was told by his father, and he said that his dad told him that my grandfather loved him very, very much. So did his mother, who's sitting right there. But he said that your biological parents didn't want you, but we did, and we love you. And my dad said, this was a speech given 2 years ago, he said that those words, the only words that he really heard was, they didn't want you. And it broke his heart, but that led him, in my opinion, to being the beautiful man that he actually was. My father was patient, he was humble, he was gentle, and he was kind. We love watching movies together, me and my family, and one of our favorites, all of the Rocky movies, as silly as it may seem. It's inspiring, watching Rocky, all of his trials, all of his tribulations, all of his boxing matches. I'm here to tell you that literally, and my dad wouldn't actually probably want me to say this, but that man over there was the real Rocky Balboa. And I mean that with all of my heart. He led, and some of the teammates that are sitting here can tell you what he went through to play football, to wear, and to get this ring that I'm wearing on my hand right now. He was the real Rocky Balboa. My father, it led him to be the gentleman that he was, and he often would tell me and my brothers as we grew up, when my oldest brother Keith, who just spoke, when he was born, he said he took him in his arms, and he was the first person to hold him, and he said, he looked down at those big blue eyes that he has, and he said, that one is mine. And that's what led him to be this sweet and gentle man. Recently, I took my dad's phone, and he wrote me this not long before he passed, and I think it's poignant, and I'm going to read it. This is literally his phone. He said, this is a text to me, Carl, I will personally pursue your love and your love of your brothers until I take my dying breath. A long time ago, when I was feeling sorry for myself at one point in my life because I was just a 9th grade coach, I came to the conclusion that all that mattered to me in the end really was being a good dad and a good Christian. I failed on most counts and on many counts, many times I'm sure, but my love for you and for God and for Jesus, that never failed. And he capitalized never. And he said, my life is of no consequence to me compared to the love that I have for my sons and for Jesus. My dad said in that same speech with my brother, he said, if it ever was to be against the law to be a Christian, he wanted the evidence against him for it to be overwhelming. Now, I am an attorney, and so when I heard that, it spoke special to me because my father did work with me for the last couple of years of his life, and he knew in a criminal trial, the evidence that's needed to convict is it's the highest standard that we have in our entire justice system. The evidence has to be overwhelming. And what my father was saying there, he knew what that standard was. He said that he wanted it not to be just beyond a reasonable doubt. He wanted it to be overwhelming. He wanted it to leave no doubt. He wanted it to be beyond all doubt, and he wanted it to be overwhelming. I'm going to tell you, through the 36 years of my life, how that evidence was overwhelming. My dad was a protector. He was the best protector that I've ever known. It's why I tell my beautiful son, Benjamin, who's sitting in the front row, I tell him, what do daddies do? And I say, I have him, it's a canned response sort of now, but it's, they protect. And it's because that's how my father always made me feel. My first memory when I was growing up that I can really remember was I was staying at my grandmother's house with my grandfather. First night away from my home, and I was very close to them growing up, and I probably was about Benjamin's age, maybe even my nephew Hudson's age. But I remember being very scared And I was scared. I remember running down the hall, and they were sort of trying to console me in my little Hudson brain and Benjamin-sized brain. All I could really communicate to them was that I felt unsafe. And they said, "Why, buddy?" And they said, "Because I want my daddy." Because I knew he had muscle. And to then, to a little boy, that muscle made me feel sheltered and protected. And so I remember my grandfather, that he was just very sweet. Remember, he flexed his muscles and he tried to show me his muscles, and I remember looking at him, just probably like, I was literally probably younger than Benjamin, I said, and I looked at him and I can still remember going, I said, I want to go, and that was no disrespect against my grandfather, but my dad did love lifting weights, and I said, I want to go home to be with my daddy. There was a song one time I was going through some hard times, and so were both of my brothers. I don't remember what the situation was, and he was being a great husband. He was coaching football. He was working in a missionary trip with a group in India, and I was driving in a car, and I remember asking, "Daddy, why are you so good to me? Why are you so good to us? How do you do it? What's the reason?" And I remember my dad always had these very special words that he would impart to us. He'd always give us this little tidbits, almost answers that were in an analogy form, you know, and a song came on that I had never even heard before, but I remember he just thought, and he heard the song, and I don't know if it was coincidence or divine intervention. I really don't know. What I do know is he said, "This is why, Carl," and he turned the song up, and I'm not a good singer, so please bear with me, but the pertinent words are the following. "I woke up crying late last night when I was very young. I had dreamed my father had passed away and gone. My world revolved around him. I couldn't lie there anymore. So I made my way down that mirrored hall and tapped upon his door. And I said, 'Daddy, I'm so afraid. How will I go on with you gone that way? I don't want to cry anymore. So may I stay with you?' And he said, 'That's my job. That's what I do. Everything I do is because of you, to keep you safe with me. That's my job, you see.' I can't tell you over the 36 years that I spent with that man, how many times that I felt like that little boy running down the hall, wanting to be with my father, because I knew he could keep me safe." The rest of the song goes as follows. The singer goes on, and he says, he's a singer obviously, and he wants to go to Nashville, and he goes to his daddy again later in life, and he says, I could make it out there. If I just had the fare, I got half, will you loan me the rest? And I said, "Daddy, I'm so afraid. There's no guarantee in the plans I've made. And if I should fail, who will pay my way back home?" And he said, "That's my job. That's what I do. Everything I do is because of you, to keep you safe with me. That's my job, you see." Now, Father was the most selfless person that I've ever met. And his response when I asked, "Why do you do this, Daddy? Why do you protect us? Why are you so selfless?" was, "That's my job, you see." I took this, and many of you may not see it. This is my oldest brother when my dad was young, and this is Sienna, my niece. This was my father. This exemplified how he led his life, behind us, protecting us, most of the time not even knowing that we're there. This was my father. Now, I believe God puts people in our lives to exemplify his love, his unconditional love. My father, he wasn't just a protector. He was merciful, and he was humble. My father was a football coach. When I was young, I would follow literally right around his footsteps. Some of his players are here can probably remember that. I literally followed right behind him across the halls that Pastor Gromberg said at Reagan High School. One time there was a player that did something in a game. He took his shoulder pads off in the middle of a big game, and some of the other coaches were upset, and my dad just said, "Let him be." The following week, there was a booster club meeting with the parents, and my dad had the booster club meeting, and he waited, and so one parent at the very end, he raised his hand and he said, "Coach," very mad, he said, "why aren't you kicking that individual off the team?" And my dad responded very patiently and gentle, and he said, "If I do that, where does he go? Who's his family now? What's going to happen to him? I can do that. But what's going to happen to that young man?" My dad didn't do that to be a show-off. He did it because that's who he was. He genuinely cared about that human being. And that, to me, is the way God feels for us. And he said to me then, all the parents then looked back at this individual, glaring back at him like, really? That's who my father was, patient, kind, and humble. My dad, after he passed, I was going through some of his things, and he had a diary that I never really knew that he kept. And in it, I read some things that it made me sad, but it exemplified how my father was. He had an unconditional love for us, and one of the many things that he valued more than anything was just time spent. And I'm talking to you as my experience as his son, and I'm trying to convey how my dad was as a father. And what he wrote to himself, he wasn't writing it to someone else, it was just his notes on what meant the most to him in his life. And he said that what meant most to him was his time that he could spend with his sons. And one of the things that he wrote was, whenever one of my boys comes home to the house for any reason whatsoever, it feels like Christmas morning. And I read it and I cried, because I remember this last Christmas when I prepared Christmas, all the presents for my little boy, and I remember being a little boy myself at Christmas, and how excited do you get on Christmas morning? You wake up and you're excited because there's trees under there. My little one came out in his footed pajamas and he ran under the tree. So excited, so joyful. That's how my father, that's how he felt when just any one of us just came to his house just to say hi. It felt like Christmas morning as a child. My father, he was a very humble man, and so he did work with me the last couple years of his life, and at times at the courthouse, I'd have some clients and he would give them money, unbeknownst to me, which was ironic because they were supposed to be paying me, but he was paying them, but he never told me that would happen, and so I would only find out at another court setting, and that client or whoever it was would come up to me and say, "Hey, is your dad here?" And I'm thinking, I'm the attorney, like, why do you want my, you know? And so they go, "Well, he gave me money last time," and I think, Dad. But he never let me know that. And usually it was because maybe they wanted more money, but he would give it to them when he felt like they needed money to get back home or just something to eat. Integrity is something that you do when you know no one is watching. I only found out about those instances when those people would come up to me afterwards and say that your father gave me money. And I wish now that I never got frustrated, but I wish now that I would have said, "Daddy, you exemplify what Christ tried to teach us and what his unconditional love is for us." That's who my father was. Another thing that he wrote in his diary was, each of us have lived in different cities in our lives, and he wrote in there that he would make up excuses sometimes. My brother and I once lived in Houston together when I was in law school, and he was a pastor at a church there, and he said, he was writing in his diary, and my brother lived in Killeen when he was in the Army, and he said sometimes he would just make up reasons, simple reasons, to be able to come visit us, just to have lunch, just to spend 30 minutes with us. And he said the drive time, whatever it was, it would have been worth 3 times that, just for a 30-minute lunch with his sons. That's unconditional love. And the thing that he valued most was the time that he spent with the 3 of us. And it wasn't just that, it was those players that I can see in the back that I just talked to. It was his loved ones that are over here. It was everyone that's sitting here, the strength camp members and everyone. That's how my dad was. He enjoyed just being around people and trying to show them love. My dad's love was unconditional. I didn't really realize it until I was talking to my brother, Anthony, who's about to speak after me. When I was young, and some of the players that are in the back could probably remember, I liked to read a lot when I was 10 years old. That's just what I was into. And my father's love was absolutely unconditional for us. And I didn't really know it back then, but at that age, there was no indication that I was going to be as good at sports, and especially football, as my oldest brother and my middle brother. I was small for my size, and I liked reading. And one of the things that he also wrote in his diary is, "I am always going to pledge to love whatever my sons love." And it made me sad after reading all of this after he passed, because I knew what he was doing back then. I didn't know that I did end up playing football for him, as Pastor Gromberg said at Lanier, and I played for him. But back then, he had no indication that I was going to play sports or even care about sports. But what he did know is that I liked reading. And so his favorite thing then was just going to a comic book store and collecting comic books to read with me. He just simply wanted to love what we loved. It didn't matter what, whether it was playing the piano, we weren't into that, or doing whatever it was. My father just wanted to love whatever it was that we did. There was a player that I saw earlier, and recently he wrote, I put a picture on Facebook of me kissing my son Benjamin. I love him more than I can possibly tell. And he commented on that post, and I remember he said, I never knew until your father, when he coached at Reagan, that it was masculine, and a person could be a masculine male and still be affectionate to their child. And that thought never occurred to me, because my father showed unconditional love for me and kissed us. My mom would say that when we were little, he would take us, when we were sleeping, she'd say, Dennis, stop. Don't wake the babies up. And he's, I just can't help it. I just have to love on them and kiss them. That's who my father was. At the end of my father's life, like my brother said, I was with him, we were all with him until the very end, and I'm not going to mince words. It was very painful for him, and he was suffering. He was suffering beyond anything that I've ever seen on this earth. He was in pain. And some of his last words were, just like my brother said, he was saying, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. I love you, Jesus. I love you, Jesus. Now, I thought then, and I keep thinking now, that it's only a natural response for someone when they're in that much pain and their body is failing and they're suffering, for them to say, help me, Jesus. Help me get through this. I was saying it for him. I was saying, help him through it. Take this pain from my father's body. But that wasn't my dad. His last breaths, he was thanking him. He was saying, thank you. Now, there's a passage in Timothy, 2 Timothy, and I told my father this, some of his last moments. It's Timothy 4:6, and it says, for I am now, Paul was talking to his protege Timothy, and he knew that the time on his earth was near, and what he wrote was this, for I am now ready to be offered, and the time of my departure is at hand. I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, and I have remained faithful. Simply put, like Paul, my father fought the good fight, he ran the race, and he did it until the end. But he never asked for anything in return, and all those things that we're talking about, he would have probably asked us not to speak of any of these things if he were here. But that's who my father was. He fought the good fight, and he ran the race, and he finished strong. Some people, when they leave this earth, they leave holes in our lives that are very hard to fill. Others, some that are special people, they leave Grand Canyons of a hole. My father left a Grand Canyon of a hole. That's how special he was. I don't know that I'll ever meet a man like him again in my entire life. What I do know is that anything that I have inside me that is good, as a father, as a son, as a brother, as a friend, anything that I have as an attorney, what I do know is that I got from him. But what he would tell you, what he would want me to tell you is this, is that he got all of that strength, and he got all of that, everything that I've just described to you, he got it because of his faith in God and his son, Jesus. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you all for being here for my father.